There's a famous line that says, "We don't lose friends. We simply realize who our real ones are." Life is too short to be surrounded by people who drain your energy, destroy your peace, and make you feel small. And the truth is, not everyone around you is meant to stay. Some people come into your life as lessons, not blessings. And sometimes letting them go is not selfish. It's necessary for survival. Let me tell you, one of the most poisonous behaviors someone can bring into your life is disrespect. When a person constantly disrespects you, belittles your dreams, mocks your efforts, and treats your feelings as insignificant, that is a clear sign that they don't value you. Not everyone will agree with your goals. Not everyone will understand your path. But if someone consistently tries to pull you down, to make you feel unworthy, or to make you doubt yourself, that person is not just a critic. They are a threat to your emotional well-being. Respect is one of the most fundamental human needs, yet it is often misunderstood, underestimated, or taken for granted. When you allow someone into your life, whether it is a friend, family member, colleague, or partner, you are not just sharing your time, you are sharing your emotional space, your energy, your vulnerabilities, and in many ways, your identity. When that space is occupied by someone who constantly disrespects you, belittles your capabilities, or makes you feel inferior, it does not merely hurt your feelings. It affects your confidence, your self-worth, and your overall quality of life. Respect is not a luxury or something to be earned only after meeting conditions. Respect is a basic requirement of healthy human interaction, and when someone repeatedly fails to honor that, it is a clear indication that their presence is not aligned with your well-being. Many people struggle with recognizing disrespect because it rarely appears in obvious dramatic forms. Sometimes it is subtle, a sarcastic comment, a dismissive tone, a pattern of ignoring your boundaries, or consistently prioritizing their needs over yours. These subtle forms of disrespect can be more damaging than overt hostility because they gradually shape how you see yourself. When you are constantly surrounded by negative messaging, even in small doses, you begin to internalize it. You start questioning your abilities and doubting your decisions, not because they lack merit, but because someone else constantly implies that they do. The danger of disrespect lies not only in what others say about you, but in what you start saying to yourself as a result. It is not uncommon for individuals to tolerate disrespect because they believe it is better to stay silent than to create conflict. They rationalize toxicity with statements like, "Everyone has flaws," or "Maybe I am overreacting," or "It's easier to keep peace than confront them." But silence, in these circumstances, does not preserve peace. It sacrifices it. Accepting disrespect to avoid discomfort is a short-term strategy with long-term consequences. The longer you tolerate being treated poorly, the more normalized it becomes, and the more you signal to others that your dignity is negotiable. A person who does not respect your value will always take advantage of the opportunity to diminish it. Respect is deeply connected to how we view ourselves. When someone treats you with dignity, consideration, and empathy, it reinforces your belief that you matter. On the other hand, when someone consistently disrespects you, it causes you to question whether you deserve better. When you remain in environments where you are criticized, mocked, or ignored, you unconsciously start adjusting your behavior to meet the expectations of disrespect. You become quieter, smaller, more hesitant, not because you lack capability, but because you are trying to avoid further emotional harm. Over time, you lose parts of yourself that once made you confident, expressive, and hopeful. One of the most powerful realizations a person can have is that respect should not have to be earned through suffering, perfection, or endless proving. Respect is not currency, it is a standard. It should be present even when you disagree, even when you make mistakes, even when your perspective differs from someone else's. A lack of respect is not a reflection of your inadequacy, but of the other person's inability to recognize value. Identifying this difference is essential Because many people spend years trying to convince disrespectful individuals to treat them better, unaware that the problem has nothing to do with them. The professional and emotional growth of an individual is shaped by their environment. When you are surrounded by people who uplift you, support you, and value your presence, you grow with confidence. When you are surrounded by people who belittle you, limit you, or undermine you, you begin to shrink mentally, emotionally, and professionally. Respect determines whether you feel safe to express your ideas, pursue your goals, and evolve into a better version of yourself. Therefore, allowing disrespect is not a minor inconvenience. It is a barrier to your development. In life, you cannot control how others treat you, but you can control what you accept. The moment you decide that disrespect is not acceptable, you shift from defending your worth to honoring it. Respect is not about ego. It is about dignity, stability, and emotional health. When someone repeatedly fails to respect you, walking away is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of profound self-respect. Your energy is one of the most valuable resources you possess, yet most people treat it as if it were unlimited and unimportant. The truth is, your emotional, mental, and psychological energy directly influences how you think, how you work, how you build relationships, and how you navigate challenges. When you are surrounded by people who constantly drain that energy through negativity, manipulation, criticism, or unnecessary drama, your ability to function at your best becomes severely compromised. Protecting your energy is not an act of selfishness. It is a crucial component of maintaining clarity, purpose, and emotional balance. In a world that demands productivity, creativity, and resilience, you cannot afford to waste your energy on environments that weaken your capacity to perform and evolve. There are individuals who drain energy without even realizing it. They complain without seeking solutions, find problems in every opportunity, and see every failure as a final destination rather than a temporary setback. Spending time with such people mentally exhausts you because you are constantly forced to provide reassurance, encouragement, and emotional support without receiving any in return. Emotional labor becomes one-sided, and you begin to feel responsible for problems that were never yours to solve. When your energy is consistently spent uplifting others who have no intention of uplifting themselves, you inevitably experience burnout, frustration, and emotional fatigue. Not everyone deserves access to your mind, your time, or your spirit, especially if their presence hinders your growth instead of contributing to it. Your environment plays a silent but powerful role in shaping your mindset. When you surround yourself with individuals who are passionate, optimistic, and forward-thinking, their energy becomes contagious. You feel motivated to set higher goals, challenge your limitations, and pursue progress with confidence. But when you surround yourself with those who constantly gossip, criticize others, or dwell in negativity, your own mindset becomes clouded with pessimism. What you repeatedly hear, you eventually start believing. Protecting your energy means being mindful of what influences you, because every conversation, every interaction, and every relationship either strengthens you or weakens you. People often stay in draining relationships or toxic environments because they underestimate the impact it has on their mental performance. You cannot make wise decisions when your mind is clouded. You cannot build meaningful connections when your emotions are depleted, and you cannot be productive when your time is consumed by unnecessary conflict. The exhaustion caused by emotional toxicity is not visible, but it is deeply felt. You begin to experience irritability, lack of motivation, and a gradual decline in passion. Suddenly, tasks that once excited you feel overwhelming, not because you lost interest, but because your energy was consumed by situations that offered nothing in return. Protecting your energy requires emotional discipline. It means setting boundaries even when it is uncomfortable, saying no even when you fear disappointing others, and distancing yourself even when you are tempted to stay. It requires the clarity to recognize the difference between helping someone grow and enabling their stagnation. You are not responsible for fixing people who refuse to take responsibility for their own choices. You are not obligated to participate in conversations that destroy your peace or relationships that compromise your self-respect. Energy protection is not avoidance, it is alignment. Aligning yourself, why? People, environments, and habits that support your long-term growth rather than sabotage it at a deeper level. Protecting your energy is also about protecting your identity. When you constantly give your emotional strength to situations that drain you, you lose sight of who you are and what you are capable of. You become reactive instead of intentional, overwhelmed instead of focused, and doubtful instead of confident. But when you preserve your energy for activities and relationships that nourish you, you experience clarity, motivation, and a renewed sense of purpose. You become more decisive, more creative, and more capable of handling challenges with composure. Ultimately, your energy determines the quality of your life. The more you waste it on draining people and unproductive environments, the less you have available for meaningful work and fulfilling relationships. Your future success depends on the choices you make today about where your time goes, who has access to your emotional space, and how much energy you allow others to take from you. Protecting your energy is not simply about avoiding negativity. It is about preserving your capacity to build a life that reflects your potential, values, and aspirations. Forgiveness is often portrayed as a grand act of virtue, a moral obligation that demonstrates emotional maturity and spiritual growth. While forgiving those who hurt you is indeed a sign of strength, there is a common misunderstanding that forgiveness requires you to continue allowing the same behaviors, accepting the same disrespect, or tolerating the same patterns that caused the pain in the first place. Forgiveness does not demand that you sacrifice your well-being, nor does it mean that you invite harmful individuals to remain in your life. It is entirely possible to release resentment without giving someone continued access to your peace. In CT, the most authentic form of forgiveness is not rooted in reconciliation but in liberation. Liberation from anger, bitterness, and the emotional burden of holding on to what is already over. People often cling to relationships that repeatedly hurt them because they believe that walking away contradicts the principles of compassion or loyalty. They confuse endurance with kindness and assume that allowing repeated harm is a sign of emotional resilience. However, there is a significant difference between understanding someone's flaws and subjecting yourself to their destructive habits. You can empathize with someone's struggles while still recognizing that their behavior is incompatible with your emotional health. Forgiveness means accepting the past without letting it control you, but it does not mean forgetting your worth or abandoning your boundaries in order to keep someone comfortable. Boundaries are not barriers meant to punish others. They are tools designed to protect your emotional stability. When someone continues to violate those boundaries even after being made aware of them, it becomes clear that they are not interested in healing the relationship, but in maintaining control over it. Continually forgiving behavior that remains unchanged only reinforces a cycle in which the offender faces no consequences for their actions, while the victim pays the emotional price. This dynamic often leads to internal conflict, where you feel guilty for leaving and exhausted for staying, trapped between wanting to honor your values and wanting to preserve your identity. Forgiveness is often associated with forgetting, but the two are not synonymous. Forgetting may cause you to repeat the same experience, whereas remembering allows you to learn from it. Holding on to lessons does not mean you are holding on to pain, it means you are honoring growth. Personal evolution requires selective detachment, letting go of people, situations, and expectations that no longer align with who you are becoming. Some individuals will try to convince you that forgiveness means giving unlimited chances, but forgiveness is not a renewable resource that others can exploit. It should not be used as a justification for recklessness, manipulation, or repeated disrespect. The emotional weight of unresolved hurt affects every aspect of your life. When you remain connected to people who repeatedly cause emotional damage, you begin to internalize the belief that their behavior is something you must accept. You may stay silent to avoid conflict, minimize your feelings to avoid rejection, or sacrifice your needs to keep someone else comfortable. Over time, these patterns erode your confidence and distort your sense of identity. Your worth becomes tangled in someone else's approval, and you start to believe that enduring harm is the price you must pay to maintain connection. Forgiveness, when misunderstood, can become an emotional trap that locks you into unhealthy situations rather than freeing you from them. Choosing to forgive and simultaneously walk away may feel contradictory, but it is often the most empowering decision you can make. It allows you to release resentment without carrying the burden of continuous suffering. It acknowledges that you cannot change another person's behavior, but you can control how you respond to it. It reflects the understanding that compassion is valuable, but self-preservation is essential. Forgiveness without boundaries is self-neglect, and boundaries without forgiveness are bitterness. Both are incomplete without balance. Walking away is not a declaration of superiority or an act of punishment. It is a decision based on clarity, responsibility, and self-respect. When you forgive someone, you make peace with what happened. When you let them go, you create space for what can happen next. Relationships that honor your growth, environments that support your evolution, and experiences that reflect your worth. The true purpose of forgiveness is not to keep harmful people in your life, but to free yourself from the emotional ties that limit your potential. Every person who enters your life carries a purpose, though that purpose may not always be obvious at first. Some individuals bring joy, stability, support, and inspiration, while others bring discomfort, conflict, or disappointment. Yet both categories serve a role, not because their behavior is ideal, but because their presence becomes a mirror that reflects who you are, what you value, and what you must learn. Human relationships are not accidental encounters. They are experiences that test your capacity to trust, to forgive, to create boundaries, and to grow beyond your current emotional patterns. Understanding that some people come as lessons and others as blessings allows you to navigate relationships with clarity. Instead of holding on blindly in fear of being alone or misunderstood, there are people who enter your life and immediately elevate your energy. They believe in your potential, encourage your efforts, and support your journey without demanding anything in return. Their presence feels comforting rather than consuming. They remind you of who you are at your best, not by complimenting you constantly, but by holding a genuine interest in your growth. They challenge you to think bigger, act with integrity, and pursue opportunities that align with your values. These individuals are blessings not because they are flawless, but because their influence helps you evolve into someone stronger, wiser, and more aligned with your purpose. The contribution is not loud or dramatic. It is subtle, consistent, and transformative. On the other hand, there are individuals who seem to highlight every insecurity you possess. They test your patience, trigger your fears, and expose behavioral patterns you didn't know existed. Often these relationships leave you with frustration, confusion, or emotional fatigue. Yet, when examined closely, they provide insights you would have never accessed otherwise. They teach you about boundaries, emotional resilience, self-worth, communication, and the importance of self-protection. The discomfort they cause is not pleasant, but it is educational. Without such lessons, you might never learn how to stand up for yourself, how to detach from unhealthy dynamics, or how to differentiate genuine connection from dependency. Lessons can come in the form of pain, because pain forces awareness. The challenge arises when we confuse lessons with blessings and try to hold on to people who were never meant to stay. Many individuals become emotionally attached to relationships that drain them because they hope that effort, loyalty, or sacrifice will somehow transform toxicity into harmony. They attempt to fix people who do not want help or seek validation from those who are incapable of offering it. In doing so, they fail to realize that some individuals are not meant to accompany them into the next chapter of their life. They were meant to reveal a truth, not provide a future. Growth requires discernment, the ability to identify when a relationship has fulfilled its purpose and when it is time to let go. The fear of losing someone often keeps people trapped in cycles of emotional compromise. They worry that letting go means failure, disloyalty, or harshness. But letting go is not a rejection of the person. It is an acceptance of the lesson. When a relationship consistently creates anxiety, dependency, or confusion, it is no longer serving growth. Holding on to it delays your evolution and prevents you from making space for healthier connections. Emotional maturity lies in understanding that endings are not punishments, they are transitions. Every departure opens the possibility of healthier presence. Similarly, recognizing blessings is equally important. Many individuals take supportive relationships for granted because they become accustomed to positivity without recognizing its rarity. They overlook kindness, undervalue loyalty, or minimize the impact of encouragement. Yet genuine support is not accidental. It is a conscious investment made by someone who sees value in you. Appreciating such individuals requires humility, awareness, and reciprocity. Gratitude strengthens relationships that uplift you, while indifference weakens them. Blessings must be nurtured, not assumed. The balance between lessons and blessings defines the quality of your emotional life. When you embrace lessons without bitterness, you gain wisdom. When you celebrate blessings with gratitude, you build meaningful connections. Personal growth is not about surrounding yourself with perfect people. It is about learning from every interaction, choosing wisely, and moving forward without resentment or regret. People may come and go, but each one leaves an imprint that shapes your journey in ways you may not fully understand until much later. One of the most subtle yet damaging experiences in human relationships is feeling as though you must constantly prove your worth to someone. When you are placed in a position where your value, effort, or loyalty is questioned time and again, it gradually erodes your confidence and skews your perception of self. A healthy relationship, whether personal or professional, allows you to show up authentically without the incessant need to justify your existence or compete for validation. When you find yourself trapped in a dynamic where you must work endure, sly to convince someone that you are deserving of respect, attention, or appreciation, it is often a sign that the environment is incompatible with your emotional well-being. There are individuals who, due to insecurity or emotional immaturity, are unable to recognize the worth of others without turning it into a competition. They may consistently compare you with someone else, minimize your achievements, or set unrealistic standards that leave you feeling inadequate. These behaviors are rarely about you. Rather, they reflect a fundamental discomfort within the other person. When someone is unable to appreciate their own identity, they often attempt to diminish others in order to feel superior. Unfortunately, when you internalize their perspective, you begin to view yourself through their distorted lens, believing that you are perpetually falling short. This creates a cycle of emotional dependency, where you chase approval that is strategically withheld. Worth becomes a performance-based currency in such environments. You might feel compelled to overextend yourself, compromise your boundaries, or tolerate disrespect in order to earn acceptance. This pursuit is deceptive because the goalpost constantly moves. What satisfies someone today may be dismissed tomorrow, leaving you perpetually striving but never arriving. The emotional exhaustion of repeatedly trying to prove your value is not due to lack of effort, but because you are engaging in a negotiation that was designed to fail. You cannot earn genuine respect from someone who is committed to undermining you, no matter how flawless your performance may be. People often remain in such dynamics because they confuse conditional appreciation with genuine care. They believe that if they just work harder, explain more clearly, or prove themselves convincingly, the relationship will stabilize. Yet the problem is not the key level of effort. It is the absence of reciprocity. Healthy relationships are rooted in mutual recognition of value. Respect is offered not as a reward, but as a standard. You should not have to chase acknowledgement or justify your feelings in order to maintain connection. When you find yourself explaining who you are to someone who refuses to see you, it is a sign that you are fighting a battle that undermines your dignity. Self-worth becomes compromised when external validation is treated as a prerequisite for emotional security. The more you depend on others to affirm your value, the more power they hold over your identity. Instead of acting from a place of confidence, you begin acting from fear. Fear of rejection, criticism, or abandonment. This fear shapes your behavior, influencing everything from the decisions you make to the relationships you pursue. You might avoid expressing opinions, suppress emotions, or delay goals because you are preoccupied with maintaining acceptance. The cost of preserving the relationship becomes your own authenticity. Recognizing this pattern requires introspection and courage. You must ask yourself whether the constant struggle for approval is truly reflective of who you are, or whether it is a response to an emotionally unsafe environment. When someone is capable of seeing your value, they acknowledge it without needing you to perform for it. They support your aspirations, respect your boundaries, and accept your imperfections without weaponizing them against you. Authentic connections do not rely on conditional acceptance or emotional competition. They allow you to grow without fear and contribute without being overshadowed. Reclaiming your dignity involves shifting from external validation to internal affirmation. It means acknowledging that your worth is inherent, not earned through perfection or performance. When you stop participating in dynamics that force you to prove yourself, you create space for healthier relationships to enter. You begin choosing environments where your presence is valued, not negotiated. Ultimately, self-respect requires you to recognize that you should not have to argue for your worth. The right people will see it without being convinced, and the wrong people will never see it no matter how hard you try. Growth is often portrayed as an inspiring journey filled with progress and self-discovery, yet one of the most challenging aspects of growth is the necessity to let go of people, habits, and environments that no longer support who you are becoming. It is easy to remain attached to familiar relationships even when they limit you, because familiarity offers comfort, predictability, and a sense of belonging. However, comfort is not always synonymous with well-being, and belonging should not come at the expense of authenticity. Many individuals stay in situations that hinder their growth simply because they fear the discomfort of change more than the consequences of stagnation. Real progress requires emotional courage. The courage to choose uncertainty over dysfunction, self-respect over approval, and evolution over attachment. When you hold on to relationships that consistently drain your energy or undermine your confidence, you are essentially sacrificing long-term fulfillment for short-term familiarity. The mind often rationalizes such choices with narratives like things will eventually change or leaving makes me a bad person, even when there is little evidence to support those beliefs. This emotional loyalty can be admirable, but when loyalty becomes self-sacrifice, it stops being a virtue and becomes a burden. Growth demands that you evaluate not just how relationships make you feel today, but how they affect your future. If an environment repeatedly diminishes your ambitions, silences your voice, or pressures you to shrink yourself, it is not aligned with your personal evolution. Letting go does not necessarily mean you harbor resentment or wish harm on others. In fact, holding anger only binds you to what you are trying to leave behind. True detachment involves acknowledging the role someone played in your life, accepting that their chapters ended, and moving forward without bitterness. This emotional clarity allows you to preserve compassion while prioritizing your well-being. Many people confuse detachment with coldness, but in reality, it is an act of responsibility, accepting that you cannot build a fulfilling life while constantly negotiating your identity to fit someone else's limitations. Personal growth also requires recognizing that you cannot become who you are meant to be while maintaining the same patterns, relationships, and mindsets that shaped who you used to be. Evolution demands disruption. It demands the willingness to release what is familiar in order to embrace what is possible. People tend to overlook this reality because they associate change with loss rather than transformation. They mourn the absence of relationships or routines without acknowledging the space that absence creates for opportunity. When you remove what no longer serves you, you are making room for new connections, healthier environments, and more aligned experiences to take form. Yet, letting go is rarely straightforward. There is an emotional attachment that forms not just to people, but to identities and roles you played within those relationships. You might fear that leaving a relationship means abandoning a version of yourself you spent years building. However, growth is not about rejecting your past. It is about integrating its lessons and moving forward. The courage to release old dynamics is also the courage to trust that you can build something better. Many individuals cling to what is familiar because they underestimate their ability to thrive without it. They forget that survival and comfort are not the same thing, and that settling for emotional survival prevents the possibility of emotional fulfillment. The most transformative aspect of letting go is the realization that you are not losing something essential. You are reclaiming space for something meaningful. When you distance yourself from relationships that encourage stagnation, you elevate your standards and redefine your identity. You begin to choose connections based on alignment rather than convenience, respect rather than familiarity, and growth rather than obligation. This shift does not just change who you surround yourself with, it changes who you become in the process. Ultimately, growth is not measured solely by what you achieve, but by what you release. Progress often begins with subtraction. The quiet, difficult decision to step away from people who no longer contribute to your well-being. It demands patience, self-awareness, and emotional resilience. You may lose certain relationships in the process, but you gain a deeper sense of self, a stronger inner voice, and the freedom to pursue a life that reflects your values and aspirations. Letting go is not a sign of indifference. It is an intentional choice to honor your evolution and create the space necessary for transformation to unfold. So, if someone constantly disrespects you, manipulates you, or diminishes your worth, don't hold on in the name of loyalty. Don't sacrifice your mental peace to keep temporary people happy. Protect your energy, honor your dignity, and respect yourself enough to walk away. Because when you remove the wrong people, the right ones finally find space to enter. And the moment you make that decision, you start living a life of peace, purpose, and self-respect.